Why do we read? One of my favorite poems is from the Victorian writer Robert Browning Hamilton. In 8 simple lines, he captures the essence of life, and as I'm going to argue very briefly, he captures the true essence of what the reading life is all about. I walked a mile with pleasure, she chatted all the way, but left me none the wiser for all she had to say. I walked a mile with sorrow, and never a word said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me. The late literary critic Harold Bloom, from my own alma mater, Yale, said that one of the chief reasons to read was for pleasure. We read for pleasure, but pleasure leaves us none the wiser, despite all she had to say. I agree in part that we do in fact read for some degree of pleasure, but the books that leave an indelible imprint on us are not works that we read for pleasure, but works that elicit sorrow, sadness, sympathy, empathy, when we finish reading the great story, the great journey, the great adventure that they were telling us. Having spent that little sliver of time, called life, with a certain book and its characters, we close it and feel a certain tragedy in having completed it. It is an ever-present reminder of the tragedy of life. These characters whom we get to know, the story that we become part of as a reader, gone now when we close the book, when we reach the final page, except, of course, from what we learn from it. That is going to last for, hopefully, our entire life. As many of you know, I'm a literary critic, an avid reader, and a teacher of literature. And whenever I finish a moving book, a book of great thought, consideration, and insight, I am often left with a certain sadness when I read the final sentence, pause, and close the book. Yes, I may have had some joy or pleasure in reading it. That is often part of the experience. But at its conclusion, the pleasure of the past few days or week, maybe even a month, depending on the size of the book being read, is washed away in a sea of sorrow. It is not necessarily the case that the book has made me cry because of its story or its ending. Rather, inside of my soul, I feel a certain sorrow. And having completed this little pilgrimage, and having gotten to know the characters and the story, and having bonded with them, Dr. Zhivago, War and Peace, Moby Dick, Great Expectations, Sense and Sensibility, East of Eden, Wuthering Heights, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Divine Comedy. You can go on and on and on with any book that you've read. Having sojourned with our author and their characters, I am reminded that I am plopped back down into the earthly soil to continue my own pilgrimage in life, in this world, leaving behind those characters I join for a few days or a week or a month, but knowing that they are also with me until my final rest, speaking to me, crying with me, and laughing with me on the windy and lonely road that is life. The real reason I think so many of us read, the real reason why so many of us find such great power and majesty in great literature, in great stories, and in great characters, is not merely the pleasure that we derive from reading, but that sorrow, that sympathy, that empathy, that connection we make with the characters and with the story being told, because in those characters and in that story, we find ourselves, we find our heart in the hearts of others. I walked a mile with sorrow, and never a word said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me. Those words are forever true as we read, as we journey through great literature and through great stories. The best stories do not give us such great pleasure as Harold Bloom tries to suggest. Rather, the books that cause us to feel something deep within us, the deep reality of sorrow, of sympathy, of empathy, of human connections, those are the books that remain with us until we too are buried in the grave. But hopefully, as we move and journey and adventure toward that grave, we have learned the greatest virtue that is communicated in all the great stories. That is the virtue of sorrow, of sympathy, of empathy, of coming to know other human beings in love so that we may become better, more loving human beings in life.